The King's Avatar, Chapter 576, audio source, WuxaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 576, Tree Trunk PvP. Clang, 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 clang. Repeating ceaselessly, the same sound evoked different emotions in the spectators' ears. To the players from Happy Sheep's team, this sound only brought joy to their hearts. For the players from Wolfhead's team, they could feel their hearts breaking with every strike. Wolfhead attacked over and over again. Unrivaled Super Hottie ignored all of the strikes that only dealt damage. However, every attempt to interrupt his attacks was blocked by his shield. As a result, all of Wolfhead's efforts were wasted. With Happy Sheep healing from the side, Wolfhead's attacks were nothing to Unrivaled Super Hottie. On the other side, Wolfhead's partner, Wolfclaw, was barely hanging on. His health was slipping deeper and deeper into the danger zone. Is this the true power of a top-tier tank? All of the spectators had this sort of thought. This was indeed a PvP match, but Unrivaled Super Hottie's dominating strategy screamed PvE. A top-tier tank's control over their shield had to be perfectly skillful like this. The scene in front of them clearly conveyed that all of Wolfhead's problematic attacks were deflected by Unrivaled Super Hottie's shield. Everyone agreed that this type of skill must have been forged through countless fights with monsters. A usually unpredictable PvP match had been molded into a PvE-style battle. On top of that, Wolfhead and Wolfclaw could do nothing about it. Among the two, one of them was doing everything he could think of, but nothing worked. The other one had thought of countless ideas. However, since the beginning of the match, what could he do? Nothing, absolutely nothing. Since the moment the match began, the only thing Wolfclaw could do was get beaten down. Was it going to end just like this? Wolfhead found it harder and harder to believe as he watched Wolfclaw's HP continue to fall lower and lower. He never imagined that a match could end in such a way. Could this Unrivaled Super Hottie's skill be forged solely through his battles with monsters? Not necessarily. PvE could develop mechanical skill, but it could not nurture such awareness. To defend with a shield, one must be able to predict the opponent's attacks. Unrivaled Super Hottie hadn't made a single mistake regarding such prediction so far. This alone was enough to prove the vast amount of PvP experience he had. The problem was that he only had around 2,000 arena matches. Some of those were even fought by other people. How could he possibly have gathered any experience? Or did it mean that his PvP experience was accumulated in the wild? The battles in the wild were undoubtedly more chaotic than the ones carried out in the arena. Because if the player didn't bet in the arena, then the match would simply be a matter of victory or defeat. However, every fight in the wild was a gamble. The loser could lose experience and equipment. Therefore, battles in the wild required more mental strength than fights in the arena. In the arena, after many matches, the player would eventually grow numb towards the result. On the other hand, in the wild, under such pressure, the player would never grow numb towards the result. As a result, there were quite a number of players who had lost all interest in the orderly battles in the arena. Instead, they would go around the wild to hunt. Was this person one of those experts? Wolfhead was scared now. In contrast with the arena matches, fights in the wild usually involved more complicated situations. In addition, these fights rarely started fairly. You could start at an advantage or at a disadvantage. In general, players who preferred fights in the wild were much better at dealing with complex and disadvantageous situations than regular players, who liked the arena better. Compared to the wild, the arena seemed more like delicate flowers. After figuring out that Unrivaled Super Hottie was an expert of the wild, Wolfhead, who knew his own skills were inferior to his opponents, became even more afraid. His attacks weren't as fierce as before. Watching from the sidelines, Happy Sheep was a bit confused. He found it strange that a PvP battle could develop into such a situation. Even though he wasn't as experienced as Wolfhead, as a long-time player, Happy Sheep still knew that this situation was created entirely by Unrivaled Super Hottie. But did this scene prove Unrivaled Super Hottie's expertise in PvE or PvP battles? Happy Sheep could hardly tell the difference. Nonetheless, the situation in front of him was undoubtedly the most classic scene of a PvE monster fight. The scared Wolfhead didn't even have thoughts of going all out. He continued to whack Unrivaled Super Hottie sluggishly. His attacks were becoming automated and he practically transformed into a stationary attacking tower. As the repetitive metallic sounds of shield and armor continued to clank, the match reached its peak. This kind of stationary battle was the simplest but also the most boring. Clearly, it was very unlikely for the current situation to change much now. Everyone was waiting for the moment Wolfclaw fell. Once that happened, then this match would be set in stone. The audience didn't have to wait for long. Wolfclaw, who did nothing but get chopped since the beginning of the match, finally fell. In that same moment, Wolfhead gave up all hope and stopped attacking. He directly surrendered and left the match. The atmosphere was somewhat cold. Despite the quick pacing at the beginning that ignited the audience's excitement, this match ended rather unexpectedly. There were no up and downs, no excitement, nothing. It couldn't have ended more dully. The start had everyone's hearts in their throats, but the ending didn't even allow their hearts to fall back down. The match steadily trapped their hearts there uncomfortably. Everyone felt that the match hadn't been good. Regardless of which side won, neither side felt satisfied. Leader. Let me try. This person was from Wolfhead's party. Some had found their defeat unreasonable and humiliating. For the sake of their pride, many were demanding a rematch. As for Wolfhead, only he, who had experienced the battle for himself, could understand the helplessness that he felt. Even though he had analyzed the situation, even though he knew how to change the situation and attempted to do so, the result was the same, not the slightest thing changed. If he would have known, then he would rather have attacked Happy Sheep. Even though that would have gotten the same result, at least he wouldn't feel like choking on bitterness now. Wolfhead didn't know what he could say to the eager players who wanted a match. He understood how they felt. If he had watched such a match from the sidelines, he would definitely want a match to turn the mood around. That was because, from the views of the spectators, they thought of many ways of disrupting Unrivaled Super Hottie's attacks. However, only by being there in person would they discover that all of these ideas would have been useless. Didn't Wolfhead try? But the crucial strikes would always be blocked by the opponent's shield. No need. Wolfhead sighed. It's useless. WashOurWorldAudio.com. Leader, you and him are of the same class. He knew knights too well. If it were any other class, then it definitely wouldn't have been the same. Someone cried out. Upon hearing this, Wolfhead's heart shook with realization. Right. He himself had been wondering how Unrivaled Super Hottie saw through every trick of his, but now he knew. He had overlooked such a fundamental factor: they were of the same class. Due to the extreme familiarity both parties possessed regarding the other, matches between the same class tended to be boring and have little entertainment value. The result of this particular match was an extreme example, but Wolfhead suddenly found the excuse. Because we're of the same class, quite plausible. Let me try. The players of Wolf's party were fairly upright. Without the words of their leader, none of them would go up and challenge Unrivaled Super Hottie on their own. Meanwhile, on Happy Sheep's side, things were unusually quiet. Although they had won the match, it had not been a glorious victory. With no dramatic ambience to speak of, it was as if all that happened was a weak monster that guarded the gateway of a dungeon had been killed. If everyone started cheering in delight, the scene would be rather weird. After all, Wolfhead's team and Happy Sheep's team both belonged to tyrannical ambition, so the competition between them had always been constructive. They weren't actually enemies, so they didn't only seek the end results, but rather mutual benefit. What they need was the process. As of now, the overly mundane process left him unsatisfied. Even the act of bragging about their victory felt hollow. Therefore, despite being the victors, no one from Happy Sheep's party went over to Wolf's head party to laugh at their failure. Unrivaled Super Hottie, do you dare to have a match with me? At this moment, someone from Wolfhead's party issued a challenge. The victory didn't bring much joy to Happy Sheep's party, but it brought much bitterness and discomfort to the Wolfhead's team, so they were eager to prove themselves. What? After seeing the last fight, you still want to fight me? Unrivaled Super Hottie replied. Useless words. Is there a need? Unrivaled Super Hottie gave an unexpected answer. Happy Sheep and the others thought he would jump in again without asking for the team's opinion. Are you trying to run after taking a victory? The opponent started to mock him. Is it because you thought the match was too boring and the victory wasn't beautiful? Unrivaled Super Hottie replied. Exactly. If it were me. If it were you, it would have been the same. Unrivaled Super Hottie interrupted. Come on. Show me. The player had already entered. He was a launcher. Similarly, he brought a cleric with him. Last one. Unrivaled Super Hottie said and entered. Then he asked Happy Sheep's team. I need a cleric. I can do it. Happy Sheep entered by himself. Ready? The opponent asked coldly. Start. As soon as the match started, the launcher began attacking, but with a slight sidestep, Unrivaled Super Hottie easily dodged the attack. Immediately, the latter followed up with a Night Spirit. This was a rule within the arena. All cooldowns would be reset at the start of a new match. Right after Night Spirit was activated, Unrivaled Super Hotties charged forward. The launcher was expecting it. He jumped and tried to avoid it with an aerial cannon, but who would have thought that Unrivaled Super Hottie's charge would curve instead of go in a straight line? The heroic charge came in from a strange angle and slammed the launcher back into the ground. The skill hadn't finished yet. Pushing the launcher along with him, the curve continued to stretch around the arena. The cleric had never imagined that the charge would even come close to him. Unable to dodge in time, the cleric was hit. The heroic leap that followed smashed into both of them. Unrivaled Super Hottie then stunned the launcher with a shield attack and focused on the cleric. He's finished rounding up the monsters already. Those familiar with the scene couldn't help but make a comment. End chapter. The King's Avatar, Chapter 577, Audio source, WurshaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 577, Replicating Victory. The launcher had planned on taking the initiative from the beginning, but after just a single skill, the last match repeated itself again. As a matter of fact, it was worse since he had fallen into hot water right away. Wolfhead had at least thrown out a provoke against Unrivaled Super Hottie and attacked Happy Sheep at the beginning of the match. However, players weren't NPCs. Even though the cleric was entirely powerless under Unrivaled Super Hottie's control, the launcher would be cleared of the stunned state eventually. Wolfhead's players were brainstorming on how to deal with this type of situation. Meanwhile, the launcher was preparing for his next move. The moment the stun duration ended, the launcher retread by using an aerial fire. As expected, Unrivaled Super Hottie paid no attention to him. Then, the launcher propped his cannon on his shoulder. With a blue flash, an X-1 extruder missile came flying out from the cannon's barrel some distance away. Glory had numerous skills with various CC effects, and blocking with a shield could negate many of those effects, but not all of them. X-1 Extruder's effective attracting the target then dragging the target away was one of these spells. The launcher clearly knew this, so he started off with this move that would render the shield's block ineffective, wondering what Unrivaled Super Hottie could possibly do to counter it. Nonetheless, Unrivaled Super Hottie seemed to oblivious towards the impending missile as he did completely ignored it. Only when he was about to enter the suction effects range did he swing out his sword horizontally, a repel. He obviously manipulated this skill a bit since the cleric wasn't pushed the maximum distance away. While the cleric slid away, Unrivaled Super Hottie also shifted forward, along with the cleric. The scene looked like two ghosts drifting. Everyone soon realized that Unrivaled Super Hottie had entered the X-1 Extruder's effect range and was being dragged by the missile. Facing the incoming missile, Unrivaled Super Hottie swung out his shield, not in an attempt to block but rather to attack. He didn't activate a skill though. This attack wouldn't have any special effects. It would only deal small amounts of damage, but it still successfully detonated the missile. At such close distance, the explosion would obviously hurt Unrivaled Super Hottie, but with his shield in front of him, the shockwave caused by the explosion wouldn't push him away. As for the damage taken, wasn't Happy Sheep starting to chant with his cross in the air? The cleric remained within Unrivaled Super Hottie's grip. All the possible interference caused by the X-1 Extruder were completely negated by Unrivaled Super Hottie's maneuvers. Even though the attempt had done some damage, hadn't Unrivaled Super Hottie also been taking damage from Wolfhead in the last match, but then healed by Happy Sheep? The launcher was clearly surprised, seeing his plan being dealt with so easily. But the launcher had more tricks up his sleeves. Roaming, Mechanical Seeker, Demolition, Satellite Beam. Skills activated one after another, each with a thoughtful plan laid out. Finally, this match was no longer dull in the eyes of the spectators. Everyone wondered how Unrivaled Super Hottie would nullify all of these powerful attacks. In the end, whether it was by dodging, blocking with his shield, running around, standing still, taking the attack, or not taking the attack, Unrivaled Super Hottie dispelled every attack. The only thing that didn't change was the fact that the cleric remained standing there, getting beaten up. Impossible. The launcher finally ran out of ideas, but the situation hadn't changed in the slightest. The only thing that changed compared to the previous match was the helplessness of the close-quarter fighter had turned into that of the long-range combatants. The launcher had no more plans. If he were to attack again, he could only employ his previously used strategies. Unrivaled Super Hottie might make a mistake, but would a single lucky chance be able to solve the fundamental issue? That chance could only allow the cleric to heal himself a little before falling back into Unrivaled Super Hottie's grasp again. If the cleric could truly get out of this crisp, then the battle wouldn't have been like this from the start. The launcher knew that this time, he hadn't become the savior of his team. Instead, he stood shoulder to shoulder with his team leader Wolfhead in another embarrassing defeat. The cleric eventually died, but during that time, the launcher didn't stay idle. He pointed his cannon at Happy Sheep. Poor Happy Sheep dashed around all over the arena field, but Unrivaled Super Hottie didn't show the slightest bit of interest in rescuing him. On the other hand, this launcher was desperate to kill him to save himself some face before Unrivaled Super Hottie killed off his cleric. However, he had switched targets too late. Even though Unrivaled Super Hottie's equipment was weaker, the launcher still couldn't catch up. In addition, the cleric of Wolfhead's team was much more obedient than Happy Sheep. He looked like he was just standing there, taking the attacks. Was the cleric doing this on purpose? Of course not. His current sorry state was entirely because of Unrivaled Super Hottie's manipulations. In that moment, Wolfhead finally came to this realization. Everyone focused on how Unrivaled Super Hottie nullified all of the launcher's attempts to disrupt him. However, all of Tom overlooked how Unrivaled Super Hottie's endless strikes suppressed the enemy cleric into obedience. Clerics didn't have many offensive abilities, but turning a player-controlled character into a ragdoll was still a difficult task. Is this also developed from PvE? Wolfhead, who was very familiar with knights, observed Unrivaled Super Hottie's maneuvers attentively. Unfortunately, the cleric had long since given up, so Wolfhead couldn't figure out how Unrivaled Super Hottie dealt with the cleric in detail. Thinking back now, all he remembered was how Unrivaled Super Hottie had cancelled the launcher's attacks. Up until the cleric fell, Wolfhead wasn't able to get much information. Right after the cleric fell, Unrivaled Super Hottie changed direction and charged straight at the launcher. The launcher tried to maintain some distance, but Unrivaled Super Hottie caught him after a few attempts. This could be a good chance to watch too. Wolfhead suddenly thought, wondering if Unrivaled Super Hottie would turn the launcher into another sandbag. At the same time, Wolfhead regretted quitting right after Wolfclaw's defeat. If he had fought with Unrivaled Super Hottie himself, he would know his capabilities much better. Unfortunately, the launcher replicated the entire last match, even Wolfhead's decision at the last moment. Upon seeing the defeat of the cleric and that the match had turned into a 2-versus-1 battle, the launcher surrendered. Gloom loomed over Wolfhead, but he couldn't say anything. After all, he had been the one to set this example. For this kind of match, one victory felt awkward and dull. However, there were 2 victories now and the second match was an exact replica of the first one. During both matches, the opponents were completely powerless. This demonstrated the true power of the victor. WashOurWorldAudio.com. After the second victory, cheers, applause, and congratulations exploded out of Happy Sheep's team. Quite a number of them shouted, "Do you accept it now, D-Wolves?" How could the Wolves accept such infuriating matches so easily? But what would be the point of objecting now? The other side would just say, "Then try again," and Unrivaled Super Hottie would slap them to death again. Everyone in Wolfhead's team was unhappy. Wolfhead was powerless to do anything. In the end, he could only say, "Let's go," and all of the players in Wolf's party left dejectedly. Bro, incredible. Upon seeing Wolfhead's team taking their leave, Happy Sheep's anxiety finally disappeared. His heart was filled with joy. Today, not only did they surpass their longtime rival in terms of dungeon progress, but they also beat them in the arena, which had long since been their weak spot. Even though these had only been possible because of Unrivaled Super Hottie's presence, today was still a day to remember. Incredible. Quote, "There was not a single player in the team who was unhappy with Unrivaled Super Hottie. Everyone praised their hero with joy. Ha, didn't I say it earlier? This is what I'm good at." Unrivaled Super Hottie responded, "Yes, yes." Everyone nodded in agreement. "If there isn't anything anymore, then shall we call it a day?" Unrivaled Super Hottie said, preparing to leave. Happy Sheep sighed. "Bro, you're so skilled. Once you join the guild, you'll quickly be put into the elite team. When that happens, don't forget about us. Of course. Unrivaled Super Hottie laughed. The players of Sheep's Party flocked over one after another to add Unrivaled Super Hottie on their friend list, bidding their goodbyes unwillingly. The 100-player dungeon was rather time-consuming. Despite having maintained a pretty normal schedule for the past few days, Yishu still dragged it well into the night. Chen Guo and Tang Rou had left a while ago. Even though Chen Guo was still curious about Yishu's intention for Joeing Tyrannical Ambition, she still couldn't find any interest in watching, seeing that they were still running dungeons. Although her skill wasn't that high, she had been one of the members of the main force in Excellent Era back then. The team that she was in had a much better progress in the dungeon. In Chen Guo's eyes, these people's skill levels were on the low side. After saying goodbye to the players of Sheep's Party, Yishu called it a day. However, the players of Sheep's Party had no such plans. They were obviously planning on pulling an all-nighter. As of now, they were still together chatting. The focus was none other than the expert knight that they had met today. The majority of the conversations were about how incredible this person was. I can't see it. All I know is that there is no way for me to become that skillful. The main tank, Seven Blossom Leaves, replied after being asked. I played once with the guild's main force once. I think his skills are on the same level as our branch guild's #1 knight, Flight. Happy Sheep said. That's the main tank of the elite party. He's that good, someone exclaimed. Flight, the #1 knight of the 4th branch guild, was already an unbelievable existence to the players in that guild. He might even be better. Happy Sheep spoke. Oh. Why would he say that? Seven Blossom Leaves asked. Clerics are the ones who can understand the main tank's strength the best. Even though we were really worried when we had to heal Unrivaled Super Hottie, that worry mainly came from our distrust in him. Now that I look back at the big picture, he didn't make any mistakes that we need to compensate for. All we had to do was our most basic job. Happy Sheep pointed out. End chapter. The King's Avatar, Chapter 578. Audio source, WuxaWorldAudiobook.com. Chapter 578. The People from Tyrannical Ambition. Happy Sheep's analysis received the approval of the other clerics on the team. They all expressed that, if the team had such a tank, then running dungeons would be very easy. Praising another tank in front of the team was usually considered offensive to the other tanks. But Seven Blossom Leaves himself was also completely convinced by Unrivaled Super Hottie's skill, therefore, no one in Happy Sheep's team had any misgivings. As for the second, third, and fourth tank, if even the main tank was neglected, then nothing need to be said about them. After discussing everything, everyone gasped in admiration. Happy Sheep didn't want to dampen the mood, but in the end, he found it uncomfortable to hold these words within his heart. Thus, Happy Sheep called for everyone to recognize that it would be hard for such an expert to be a permanent member of their team. Many of the players in the team had been worried about this fact earlier. Now that they heard their team leader say it himself, they all felt that it was a pity. In the first half of the night, they were pushed to the peak of excitement in waves, but after hearing this news, everyone couldn't help but feel somewhat disappointed. Sigh. Someone sighed and the conversation ended. However, the news of Happy Sheep's team completing Tomb in the Sky spread throughout the guild. There were many 100-man teams in the guild and many of them had also been stuck on Tomb in the Sky, just like Happy Sheep's team had been. The 4th and 5th branch guilds would often compete against each other. Being in the same guild didn't mean that there was a lot of teamwork and friendship. Games are more fun when there's competition. Levels, skill, equipment, anything that could be compared would be compared. Now that Happy Sheep's team had reached a completely new height in the dungeon, the players on his team were naturally very willing to share their joy with others. There were all sorts of responses in the chat. Some congratulated him, while others asked for help. Some were envious, and so on. At this moment, Happy Sheep received a message from his guild leader. "You've cleared Tomb in the Sky." "Yeah." Happy Sheep couldn't help but reply. He wished that the guild leader wouldn't notice what had happened and would just forget about Unrivaled Super Hottie's existence for the time being so they could spend a few more days with the pro. It was a pity that passing the dungeon was considered a big deal, so the guild leader came to ask him the moment he received the notice. "How did Unrivaled Super Hottie perform?" the guild leader asked. Happy Sheep took a deep breath and spoke honestly. "It was only thanks to him that we cleared the dungeon. It would have been impossible otherwise." Oh. Upon that, Happy Sheep informed the guild leader of all of Unrivaled Super Hottie's spectacular performances, including his PvP performance after the conflict with the 5th branch's Wolf Head. "How good do you think his skills are?" the guild leader then asked. "No lower than Flight," Happy Sheep replied. The value of this appraisal was not light at all. Flight was the head knight of the 4th branch, and Tyrannical Ambition's 4th branch was considered a top-tier guild in the view of Heavenly Domain players. It couldn't be compared with guilds created by normal players. The only guilds that were stronger would be the main guilds of the different clubs. A top knight of such a guild in the Heavenly Domain was very impressive. Oh. The guild leader was unsure as to how to react towards Happy Sheep's high appraisal. "Is he still on?" "He's offline," Happy Sheep replied. "Then let's talk about it tomorrow." The guild leader spoke. Yizhu slept very late that night, but he didn't get up too late in the morning. He met Chen Guo when he woke up, who instantly asked about yesterday's final result. "Cleared," Yizhu said. "How did those guys act afterwards?" Chen Guo asked. "Probably kneeling on all fours out of admiration," Yizhu guessed. After breakfast, they headed to the private room to game. When Unrivaled Super Hottie logged on, no one on his friends list was online. Happy Sheep's team hadn't slept all night yesterday, so they were still offline and had stopped work for the day. Yizhu logged onto his Unrivaled Super Hottie's account, but he didn't play on it. He found a computer besides Tang Ro and logged onto Lord Grim. "Are you just going to stand there and wait for your death?" Chen Guo was able to roughly guess Yizhu's intention. If the two accounts were logged in at the same time, it would prevent people from associating Unrivaled Super Hottie with Yizhu. If this were in the past, no matter how good a player was in the game, no one would ever imagine this player would be a god. But now, a god mingling among them was not a secret anymore between the big guilds. Now that the major guilds had been tossed around multiple times, they had to be more cautious. Even though it wasn't hard to log on to multiple accounts at the same time, it was necessary. It wouldn't be too hard to connect the dots if two experts with supposedly no connection would, coincidentally, never appear online at the same time. After Chen Guo finished dumping Unrivaled Super Hottie in the arena, she paid no more attention to him. She went over to ask what Yizhu was planning to do with Lord Grim. Leveling up through dungeons. Quote, as he spoke, Lord Grim had already logged online. He scanned his friends list and to his surprise, he found 1-inch Ash online. Yizhu was about to message him, but 1-inch Ash was already one step ahead. "Good morning, senior." "Good morning, good morning. Are you free?" Yizhu asked. Pro gamers also had work to attend to. Even though he would also be playing, it was a different type of playing. Killing time in the game counted as being quite free. "Yes. Want to enter a dungeon?" Yizhu asked. "Sure." Qiao Yivan wished to follow God and get some advice. Playing together was exactly what he wanted. Do you want me to come along? Chen Guo also responded to Ye Xiu's leveling up through dungeons. Sure. Ye Xiu agreed. Upon hearing this, Chen Guo didn't log into her 10th server account, but logged on to Chasing Haze instead. Ye Xiu invited her into the team and called for Qiao Yivan. He gave him a location and the three people went there to meet up. Level 55 was Heavenly Domain's lowest level dungeon, but it was definitely not beginner-friendly like the beginner village and the normal servers. However, Chen Guo was on her level 70 main account and there were 2 pro-level players. It went without saying that the three could easily complete a small 5-man dungeon. Chasing Haze had strong equipment, so she naturally became the main DPS unit. Qiao Yifan's 1-inch Ash assisted Chasing Haze, while he paid attention to controlling the battlefield. Ye Xiu's Lord Grim, on the other hand, ran back and forth like a fireman, doing everything. As the three people worked together, they advanced through the dungeon fairly quickly. Chasing Haze was more than capable of soloing this level 55 5-man dungeon. It goes without saying what would happen with the addition of 2 experts helping her. How is it? What knowledge have you recently gained as a phantom demon? The dungeon wasn't difficult, so Ye Xiu started a conversation with Qiao Yivan. Wasn't this why he was following Ye Xiu? He instantly reported to Ye Xiu about what he had experienced for Ye Xiu to advise him on WuxiaWorldAudio.com. Ye Xiu gave him some tips, while letting Qiao Yivan experiment on the dungeon's mobs. Even though Lord Grim could only use sword formation, he could still demonstrate it. Good, not bad, not bad. Ye Xiu watched Qiao Yifan's performance and complimented him. That's the general idea. However, these dungeon mobs are brain dead. In a real competitive setting, it will definitely not be as easy as it is now. The NPC doesn't know your intentions, so they can easily be manipulated by you. However, it's different with players. They can predict your intentions and will naturally try to interfere. They might even beat you at your own game. Therefore, your thoughts must not be set by this trying. The changes that occur in competitive matches are always more than you can ever imagine. I understand. Qiao Yivan responded. As a result, the trio continued to clear the dungeon until they couldn't anymore. All the questions Qiao Yivan had piled up were all answered. Also, it was obvious that he didn't just leave the questions there to wait for Ye Xiu to answer. He always had his own thoughts too, like a pro. Qiao Yivan was unlike Tang Rou or Steamed Bun Invasion, who need Ye Xiu to specifically guide him every step along the way. Sometimes, Ye Xiu only need to say a few words and Qiao Yivan would be able to locate the problems. In fact, Ye Xiu didn't teach him much on the mechanical side. Ye Xiu mostly taught him his own experiences and have Qiao Yivan learn about them. Experience couldn't be gained just through talking about it. But this method would tell him what to be aware of, so when Qiao Yivan experiences these circumstances himself, he'll have an idea of what to do. The morning passed like this. Qiao Yivan obviously couldn't play forever. He had to log off in the afternoon. After Ye Xiu returned from lunch, he continued to use Lord Grim, until Chen Guo noticed that someone had messaged Unrivaled Super Hottie. She called out to Ye Xiu, who decisively dumped Lord Grim aside and sped to her side. Hey, what do I do with this? Lord Grim was in middle of a dungeon, but was then just thrown to the side. Just leave him. I can continue afterwards, Ye Xiu said. Heavenly Domain's second safe place, the dungeon. Then I'll just leave him here. Chen Guo spoke as she logged off Chasing Haze. If she logged on again, she would appear in the same place in the dungeon. If a player entered a dungeon, there were no other way to leave apart from dying or clearing the dungeon. As for Unrivaled Super Hottie, he received a message from Happy Sheep. Yishu looked and saw that Happy Sheep was asking where he was. Missed Earth City, Yishu replied. Okay. Our guild's boss would like to meet you. Happy Sheep replied afterwards. Where? Yishu asked. We're at Luxuriant Mountain City. Happy Sheep said. Okay, I'll come over. Yishu replied and had Unrivaled Super Hottie leave the arena. Luxuriant Mountain City was also a level 70 city. It shared a teleportation array with Mist Earth City, so it saved a lot of trouble traveling there. After being transported to Luxuriant Mountain City and asking Happy Sheep for his location, he saw a team of players bearing the Tyrannical Ambition 4th branch title. Happy Sheep was among them. When he saw Unrivaled Super Hottie coming over, he hurriedly called out. After coming to the front, Yishu scanned the team of people's sparkling equipment. With just a glance, he instantly knew that these players were not like Happy Sheep's group who aimed for moderately difficult dungeons. These people were probably the elite members of Tyrannical Ambition's 4th guild. Loyal here, Flight, Burning Mountain. Chen Guo clicked her tongue as she watched Yishu's screen, already sighing. Oh, you know them? Yishu asked. All of them. They belong to Tyrannical Ambition. Chen Guo spoke. She originated from Excellent Dynasty and Tyrannical Ambition was their sworn enemy. Wasn't there a saying? The people who understood you the most were your enemies. Whoa, it's Wandering Peak. When Yishu tilted his camera, it caused Chen Guo to see another person, which made Chen Guo exclaim. Huh? Who's that? Yishu looked at an elementalist. You don't even know him. He's the guild leader of Tyrannical Ambition, Chen Guo spoke. Oh, Yishu paused. How incredible. I'm only familiar with the 10th server guild leader, end chapter.